All right, let's dive right into this explainer and honestly, fundamentally shift how we think about fossils. We're so used to picturing dusty rocks and dry bones, but today, we're leaving all that behind. We're talking about visceral, fleshy snapshots of interrupted lives. We're looking deep into the permafrost, where the ice doesn't just preserve a skeleton, it literally freezes time itself. Take Sparta, for instance. She's a 28,000-year-old cave lion cub. When researchers found her, they called her the best preserved Ice Age animal ever discovered. And honestly, they weren't exaggerating at all. Her whiskers, still there. Her fur is actually still soft to the touch. In fact, she's preserved so perfectly that her claws can still draw blood through a researcher's thick gloves. You're not looking at a fossil here. You're looking at a kitten that looks like she just curled up and went to sleep yesterday. But the story gets even weirder. This totally illustrates the staggering scale of time we're dealing with. A Siberian hunter found Sparta in 2018, just 15 meters away from another cub, Boris, who he'd actually found the year before. So, naturally, scientists assumed, okay, they're siblings from the same litter, met the same tragic end. But then, the carbon dating came back. They died 15,000 years apart. Just let that sink in for a second. Two cubs suffering the exact same fate, likely falling into the exact same natural freeze-thaw crack in the ice, separated by 15 millennia. The Earth literally swallowed them in the exact same spot, thousands of years apart. So, let's move into Layer 1, Beyond Bone. Unbelievable preservation in the permafrost. Meet Luba. She was a baby woolly mammoth, only about 30 days old, who drowned in riverbank mud around 40,000 years ago. And ironically, the mud that suffocated her is exactly what saved her, acting as this perfect airtight seal. We can essentially see her entire short life. Her mother's milk was still in her stomach, alongside traces of fecal matter she ate to build her gut bacteria, which, by the way, is exactly what modern elephants do. But here's the wild part. Luba survived 40,000 years perfectly intact in the ice, only to get damaged in 2007 because a local herder's cousin traded her for 2 snowmobiles. He literally propped her outside a store, and modern neighborhood dogs chewed on her ears and tail. Unbelievable, right?
The preservation we're talking about is just astonishing. You really have to imagine the sensory shock of this next discovery. The Brassavoka mammoth was standing in a field, eating a late summer lunch 44,000 years ago when the ground just opened up and swallowed it whole. It suffocated so fast it didn't even swallow its last bite. 30 pounds of undigested buttercups and grass were still between its teeth. When an expedition finally cut him out of the ice in 1901 and shipped him back to St. Petersburg, the rotting smell of an animal that had been dead for 44 millennia was so overpowering that the Russian Serena literally had to hold a handkerchief to her nose just to stand near it.
Now, this stunning blue mineral you're looking at is called vivianite. It's the result of a chemical reaction that coated Blue Babe, which is a 50,000-year-old steppe bison killed by an Ice Age lion. Winter set in before the scavengers could finish the lion's leftovers, so the bison was frozen mid-meal. When gold miners found him in 1979, his neck meat was so incredibly preserved in the permafrost that a University of Alaska paleontologist actually cut a piece off, cooked it into an earthy, tough stew, and served it at a dinner party. Yeah, you heard that right. They ate 50,000-year-old bison stew. Which brings us to Layer 2, Ancient Crime Scenes, Prehistoric Murders and Cold Cases. This layer gives us the absolute clearest physical proof that ancient humans didn't just passively coexist with these giants, they actively hunted and butchered them. We have Yucca, a mammoth whose bones were neatly stacked and organs deliberately removed. That's the distinct hallmark of human hunters, caching meat, not random scavengers. Plus, she revealed that mammoths could actually be a soft strawberry blonde color, totally changing our visual understanding of them. And then there's Xenia, presenting a 48,000-year-old frozen crime scene with injuries directly matching targeted prehistoric human hunting weapons.
But humans weren't just hunting mammoths, right? They were hunting each other. Enter Ötzi the Iceman, the oldest human mummy ever found. For years, scientists just marveled at his amazing gear, his grass-stuffed shoes, his copper axe, but then an X-ray revealed an arrowhead lodged deep in his shoulder. Thanks to the ice, we can forensically reconstruct this 5,300-year-old cold case perfectly. He won a knife fight, hiked up into the high Alps, sat down and ate a meal, and then a tracker shot him in the back from 30 meters away. They left all his incredibly valuable gear behind, meaning this wasn't a robbery, this was a personal grudge. We have the murder weapon, the 61 tattoos on his skin, his last meal, and the motive. The only thing we'll never have is the killer. The ice also preserves these incredibly intimate human tragedies. The Siberian ice maiden was a young woman, maybe 25 years old, buried with extreme care, wearing imported silk and a 3-foot-tall wig. Her skin features these elaborate, beautiful tattoos of mythical creatures that modern artists still marvel at today. But the absolute most heartbreaking detail came from an MRI scan. She had terminal breast cancer. She wasn't just some museum specimen. She was a young woman who knew she was slowly, painfully dying, likely using the cannabis found in her tomb just to manage the pain.
And then, well, we have finds that just make everyone a little uncomfortable. A severed wolf head, way larger than any modern wolf, was found with its brain so perfectly preserved, you can actually see the folds of the cerebral cortex on a scan. So how exactly did a 30,000-year-old head get cleanly separated from its body? Was the carcass slowly ripped apart by shifting ice over millennia? Or did ancient humans deliberately cut it off for some kind of dark ritual? Honestly, neither answer is very comforting, and it really forces us to ask what other chilling artifacts are trapped beneath our feet right now. All right, let's look at layer 3, liquid blood and cloning, biological impossibilities in the deep ice.
42,000. That is the number of years a baby horse lay buried in a massive Batagaica crater in Siberia. When scientists cut into the heart vessels of this incredibly well-preserved foal, they fully expected dried ancient tissue. Instead, dark red, free-flowing liquid blood pooled right out onto the examination table. Just wrap your head around that. The burial in the ice was so airtight and the cold so perfectly constant that the blood stayed in a liquid state since before modern humans even left Africa.
This proves these bodies are no longer just museum curiosities. When researchers excavated Buttercup the mammoth in 2013, she also bled dark red liquid blood right onto the ice. And this instantly shifted the entire conversation. A South Korean biotech company actually swooped in and attempted to extract working cells from her to clone a woolly mammoth. While the DNA was ultimately too fragmented to work, it's a real wake-up call. These permafrost discoveries are now the actual raw materials scientists are using to try and reverse extinction itself. Which brings us to the number 23. That's 23 tons of frozen earth literally airlifted out by a military helicopter in 1997 just to save the Jarkov mammoth. Scientists realized, if they just dug the mammoth out on site, they'd destroy a treasure trove of biological data. So they moved the entire massive block of earth to an ice cave to slowly thaw it out, millimeter by millimeter. By doing that, they preserved not just the animal, but the ancient pollen, the seeds, and the entire microscopic ecosystem frozen in time right alongside it. Moving on to layer 4, caught in evolution's act, frozen at the fork in the road. Take a look at Digor, an 18,000-year-old puppy. With his fur, whiskers, and eyelashes totally intact, scientists figured a quick DNA test would identify his species no problem. It took 4 years. Why? Because his DNA didn't match a dog, and it didn't cleanly match a wolf either. Digor lived squarely in the genetic gray zone. He's looking right back at us from the exact evolutionary fork in the road, the literal transition point caught in the ice right before domestication was fully complete. We see this exact same phenomenon with the horned lark. Tusk hunters almost threw this tiny bird away because it looked like it died maybe a few days ago. But nope, it was 46,000 years old. Today, modern horned larks exist in 2 distinct populations with very different DNA. This ancient bird's genome falls perfectly in the middle of them. It died right before the Ice Age ended, right before the mammoth steppe broke apart and forced the species to split in 2. If someone had just tossed this bird aside, we would have lost a literal, perfect snapshot of evolution caught right in the act. The ice doesn't just capture evolution, though. It captures the exact moment an ecosystem ends. The 14,000-year-old Tumet puppy had a massive surprise in its stomach, the undigested meat of a woolly rhinoceros. Now, the woolly rhino went completely extinct right around 14,000 years ago. This tiny puppy likely scavenged one of the very last rhinos on Earth, only to die shortly after in a sudden landslide. The ice kept both predator and prey linked forever by a single meal that happened right as their entire world was ending. And that brings us to the deepest layer, extinction, when the world ends. Look at the tragic contrast between these 2 survivors. The woolly rhino evolved a massive fatty hump, specifically designed to store immense energy to survive the brutal Ice Age winters. They were literally built to survive the absolute worst conditions imaginable. But then we have the 9,300-year-old Yukagir bison, an animal with that exact same survival design. Except when scientists opened it up, they found zero fat around its internal organs. None. Its body had completely burned through every single energy reserve it had. We really need to pause here and reflect on this quiet, melancholy scene. The Yokogir bison didn't die violently. There were no lion claws, no human arrows, no flash floods. As the Ice Age finally ended and the mammoth steppe disappeared, the food simply ran out. This perfectly preserved creature just laid down in a natural sleeping pose and quietly starved to death because it had absolutely no strength left to even stand. It just went to sleep, and the ice kept it there forever. There's a quote that says, "The deepest layer doesn't just freeze how something died, it freezes the moment everything started ending." These finds are incredibly important because they are so much more than just biology or paleontology. They are visceral, tragic monuments of biological worlds winking out of existence. We are looking directly at the collapse of an entire era, frozen exactly as it fell. And this leaves us with a truly haunting thought. Think about our journey today. We've gone from dusty bones to cooking 50,000-year-old stew, reading the tattoos of an ancient shaman, and discovering liquid blood from tens of thousands of years ago. It really makes you wonder, if the permafrost holds all of this, how much more history, how many more impossible biological miracles are trapped in the ice right now, just waiting to thaw? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this completely changed how you look at what's hidden beneath the frost.